The history of American exploration into uncharted territories and new frontiers will not be complete without mentioning the contribution of Jedediah Smith. Jedediah Smith was a brilliant and curious explorer, famed for venturing into new lands from the Rocky Mountains to the American West Coast and further south. At the height of his many historic expeditions through the heart of America, Jedediah Smith discovered the South Pass route that charted through the Continental Divide en route to the Rocky Mountains. Unfortunately, while on a mission to find water during a trading foray in Santa Fe, Smith separated from his partners and met with native warriors from the Comanche. He put up a brave fight, but was struck down by several arrows and killed. His incredible story of adventure and discovery inspired the journey of many others, while the path he paved continues to lead several inspired forays. In today's video, we explore his story and the events surrounding his death. Before we proceed, please like and share this video. Also, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for our channel as well. Thanks, and let's head into the video. Jedediah Smith was born to a father who was a general store owner in Jericho, New York. He had a pretty regular upbringing that involved lessons in English, most especially, as well as in Latin. It was during his time as a 13-year-old clerk on a Lake Erie freighter that he developed a fondness for a life of trade and adventure. There, he often interacted with traders on their return from the far west to Montreal, and their tales of wild adventure probably interested and intrigued him. The young Smith was determined to carve out his path in life. So he picked up interest in a Missouri Gazette advertisement placed by a man known as General William H. Ashley. Now, the general was involved in the fur trade with his partner and fellow war veteran, Major Andrew Henry. Together, they built a common business front that intended to explore and trap around the Rocky Mountains and elsewhere. The men wanted to hire 100 enterprising young men to embark on their mission, and Smith responded to this advertisement. After meeting with the general, the then 23-year-old Smith impressed him with his commanding presence and physical build. His meeting with General Ashley and subsequent employment marked the beginning of their very fruitful relationship. Smith would go on to take part or lead in several other expeditions, along with many other men on behalf of the general. They would embark on several journeys through the wilderness and over many previously uncharted territories to do business. Jedediah Smith's thirst for exploration and discovery led him on many adventures that did not always turn out nicely. Throughout his time in the fields, he met with many unfriendly natives and dwellers who often saw him and his group of predominantly white trader explorers as a threat to their existence. And in a time where great suspicion greeted the activities of many white people on native soil, his journeys were even more important. One of those adventures was the fateful expedition to Fort Kiowa on September 1823. On their way from Fort Kiowa to the Rocky Mountains, Smith and about 16 other men who had been commissioned by General Ashley tried to get directions and a few horses from the native Crow tribe. In this now infamous journey, Smith and the men came face to face with a great threat in the shape of a grizzly bear. Smith narrowly escaped death during the grizzly bear, mauling that left him permanently disfigured. He survived the attack, but not without having his scalp and ear ripped off by the vicious claws of the bear. At some point, the bear had Smith's entire head in his mouth, but he managed to pull away from the bear's brutal grip and got his wound treated by a friend called Jim Kleiman. Despite this brutal attack leaving him with a large scar that he later had to conceal with his hair, Smith continued to press on. He did not deter in prospecting and mapping routes for future wagon trains and settlers, steadily pushing westward and towards the mountains. For the rest of 1823, The fully recovered Smith and his group spent their winter in the Wind River Valley. A year later, he sent a team to chart a pliable course through the Rocky Mountains. Smith set out to get valuable information from the Crows on what direction to follow to reach the South Pass. After one of his men had produced an improvised map, he was able to extract this information from the Crows. With this information in hand, Smith and his men reached and crossed this pass, and then trapped all across the region. They delivered news of their bountiful fur harvest and the discovery of a passable route through the South Pass to the Rockies over to General Ashley. The discovery of this route ranks unarguably as one of Smith's most famous and important acts. Although the South Pass route to the Rocky Mountains was first discovered by a Scottish-Canadian trapper in mid-October 1812, Smith's discovery was the first publicized one. He made certain of that in 1830, when he wrote the Secretary of War, John Eaton, to make information about the route's discovery publicly available. His meticulous journals chronicled every step across this historic path, and several others he was privy to throughout his lifetime. During his many expeditions, Jedediah Smith succeeded in recording a wealth of natural and anthropological details along the way. His intended memoirs and collected maps promised to shine a light on the still largely mysterious American West. If only he could chart one final expedition. Jedediah Smith was famed for his many brave and curious adventures in this bid to explore new trading routes and forge new trading frontiers. He is known as the first man to successfully reach the Colorado River from the Salt Lake frontier. And he didn't stop there. Smith and his band of traders, explorers, also recorded the first successful crossing of the Mojave Desert in today's California, formerly part of Mexico. During this expedition, Smith and his men staved off the attack of certain Mojave men who were displeased with their activities. This intense encounter was neither the first nor last encounter he had with aggrieved natives or trade party. During one of his group's journeys to the Grand River to buy horses from the Arikaras, a fight ensued, and some of his men were killed in the encounter. Smith marshaled the remaining men to ward off the attacks and escape, and this earned him a reputation among the men. A similar incident happened in 1828 with the Umpqua in Oregon, who were probably already wary of his group's business dealings with indigenous people along the way. Smith and his men were ambushed, and he barely managed to escape across a hill from where he witnessed his men being massacred. After a search party was sent for him, he managed to escape to Fort Vancouver. Later, in 1829, it was the turn of the Blackfeet to clash with Smith's group in their quest to trade fur and acquire beaver in their lands. These various encounters with hostile natives in the line of duty did not deter Smith. He went on to record several other firsts throughout his lifetime, including being the first U.S. man to successfully explore and cross the Sierra Nevada and the much-dreaded Great Basin Desert. After over a decade of mountain man exploits across the Rockies, Great Basin, Pacific Northwest, and Southwest, Smith returned to St. Louis in 1829. He settled down briefly with visions of publishing his writings, or perhaps even leading a military expedition to map the continental interior for the U.S. government. Smith had joined his partners in writing to the Secretary of War, John Eaton, to request a certain federally funded exploration. At the same time, they were interested in joining a supply trade that plied several trade routes across the region. The lure of the trail proved too strong eventually. When no expedition materialized, Smith signed on to an 1831 trading caravan headed for the booming boomtown of Santa Fe in New Mexico's Northern Territory. Under the leadership of fellow mountain men William Sublette and David Jackson, the wagon train of over 80 men carried roughly $20,000 worth of trade goods like rifles, metalwares, cotton textiles, and jewelry. They intended to trade with and extract hides, furs, mules, and other resources from Mexicans, native tribes, and anyone else along the well-traveled route. Though it was considered relatively safe compared to Smith's fur trapping days, the 1,000-mile Santa Fe Trail still presented certain dangers. Just days into the journey, a Pawnee war party killed one of Sublet's clerks, named Men. Despite news of this incident reaching Smith's campway before they set foot in the region, Smith and his band of traders remained undeterred in their mission. Little did they know that their foray into this area would come at a very grave cost. And as the caravan pushed southwest into modern Kansas, an even deadlier mishap loomed on the horizon. By late May 1831, Smith's wagon train had depleted its water supplies and was urgently seeking a new source. On the 27th, Smith and a fellow traveler named Fitzpatrick split off to scout for springs near the parched Cimarron River in present-day southwest Kansas. While Fitzpatrick dug test holes in a dry creek bed, Smith rode ahead alone, seeking the same rumored springs. It was then that he encountered a band of grizzled New Mexican traders known as Comancheros. While living on the fringes of Spanish colonial society, these traders risked life and limb dealing with a notoriously fierce Comanche tribe. The indigenous Comanches dominated the vast territory known as Comancheria across the southern plains. Prizing goods like metal weapons and jewelry they could not produce themselves. Quite a few accounts of Smith's encounter with a Comanche and the events surrounding his death exist today, but several eyewitness accounts depict something close to what you'll hear next in this video. Smith's encounter with the Comanche was not exactly going to be friendly. These Native American tribes were already growing suspicious of white settlers encroaching on their land. They rightfully feared for their safety, given that the settlers were always well armed and had even recorded earlier clashes with their people. So, when they probably sighted Smith wandering across the field in search of the springs, they immediately thought to defend against an approaching enemy. Though Smith likely cut an intimidating figure, the Comancheros quickly pegged him as an unwanted outsider and liability. If their valuable Comanche trading partners saw them traveling with Smith, they warned that he would be killed, and the traders possibly attacked on suspicion of abetting a spy. After advising Smith of a nearby spring, the Comancheros bluntly stated he should continue alone without them, aware the Comanche warband they had just traded with was still in the area. Smith indeed pressed on, hoping to reunite with his party after watering his horses in the spring. But the ruthless Comanche scouts had already marked the trespassing American. As Smith reached the spring's waters in what is now known as Wagon Bed Spring, 15 to 20 Comanche warriors ambushed him. After being surrounded by the fierce Comanche with no chance for negotiation, Smith resorted to the gestures of the native Plains sign language. While smiling warmly, he motioned he meant no harm, but merely sought water for himself and his animal. The imposing Comanches fixed him with stony gazes, seemingly unmoved by the traveler's friendly overtures. They went round him and began taunting and spooking his horse in an apparent attempt to unseat him. When the Comanche formed a crescent as if to strike, Smith shouldered the Kentucky rifle lying across his lap. A single shot rang out, mortally wounding one of the native warriors, described as a chief in eyewitness report. In the same instant, another Comanche shot pierced Smith's shoulder from behind, knocking him off his horse as it reared in fright. As Smith desperately clawed for one of his pistols, the enraged Comanche descended with lances poised for the killing blow. While employing their feared buffalo hunting technique, the Comanche drove over a dozen long spears into Smith's torso as he fell, stabbing him with horrific violence. Within seconds, Jedediah Smith was dead on Kansas soil at the age of 32. This account, while not exactly profoundly accurate, remains a well-documented account of Smith's death in the hands of the Comanche. The attack cut short the life of a great adventurer and trailblazer. The Comanche wasted no time in stripping the corpse of weapons and valuables, even stopping to lash the fallen chief's body across a horse. Smith's remains were callously left behind as carrion for wild scavengers. He put up a brave fight, and several accounts have it that he caused the deaths of one or two of his attackers from the Comanche. In fact, as a mark of respect for his gallantry, some accounts report that his body was not mutilated after his death. Some even say he was given the same burial rites as one of the fallen chiefs. Regardless of how Smith bit the dust, his end remains a very unforgettable event in America's early history. At the time, news of the death of the legendary mountain man became many popular. Some days after the incident, some of the Comancheros, who had fatefully crossed Smith's path, stumbled upon Sublet and Jackson's wagon train on the Santa Fe Trail. The men bore some of Smith's possessions, and this indicated as to the whereabouts of their companion. After probably speaking with the men, Smith's companions were told of the horrible fate that befell their friend. They were never able to find his body, as he was said to have already been buried. So the men marched on, bearing tales of this sad news in their hands. Smith's youngest brother Austin, while traveling with the caravan, received the sad news of Jedediah's fate in a letter. The letter reported that Smith had been killed on the 27th of May on his way to Santa Fe by the Comanche Indians. Austin despondently transcribed to their aged father in Ohio. The letter also vividly described how Smith killed a Comanche chief before being surrounded, shot off his horse, and brutally lanced to death by over a dozen warriors. It was as violent an end as the famed explorer could scarcely have imagined after conquering so many other trials in his ambitious life on the American frontiers. Several years and decades after the death of Smith, his exploits were seemingly forgotten. An obituary published that fall in the Illinois Intelligencer paid tribute to Smith's incredible geographic footprint across the unmapped expanses of the West. However, in his adopted hometown of St. Louis, barely a mention was made of his shocking death. His writings and memoirs were lost to history, only receiving widespread published acknowledgment over a century and a half after Smith's demise on the Kansas Plain. But in the early 20th century, some scholars and historians attempted to acknowledge and study his many exploits. Harrison Clifford published a book in 1918 that touched on his various Western expeditions on behalf of General Ashley. Today, he has a couple of honorary commemorations in parks, rivers, and trails named in honor of him. Although he lived a very short life, it was a very impactful one. His various forays into the wilderness and previously uncharted territories paved the way for future expedition. Perhaps the most important contribution, which he is forever remembered for, is his discovery and publicizing of the South Pass route to the Rocky Mountains. This route has since proven a well-traveled and effective path for fur traders and explorers seeking to breach the Oregon Trail. Jedediah Smith's life and death captured the complex beauty and brutality of an important era of pioneering exploration across the vast western wilderness. For every mile of pristine landscapes mapped and recorded by Smith's inquisitive mind, there seemed to be an equal measure of savage violence. He blazed a trail over several other frontiers and new paths from Nevada to Utah. But he would pay the ultimate price for his lofty ambition. Jedediah Smith's story stands tall today as a monument towering across the heights of human discovery. His inspired expeditions recorded many historic firsts and paved the way for future expeditions, and his legend remains to date. On this note, we have come to the end of today's video. We hope you enjoyed watching this video and look forward to having you next time we roll out a video on our channel. Once again, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel. Also, Please, turn on notifications for this channel so you never get to miss out on any of our latest videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.